We had just gotten off the stage after the greatest 45 minutes of our lives. It was amazing. We woofed the house and were hugging and high-fiving and screaming like 12-year-old girls. The roadies from Ravaged Crew were filtering in and starting to set up for their band, one of the world's truly great acts of the 1980s. Our band, Starhawk, was the opening act for this night's show in Lansing, MI, and we absolutely proved that we were up to the honor we earned by being named the top local band in the Lansing area. At every stop on their big tour, a popular local band got the honor of being the opening act. We rocked the house, ripped the doors off, tore the plaster off the walls. We left the stage to a standing O. It was fantastic. We were soon joined off stage by John's wife and Michael's and David's girlfriends, and we jumped around as the volume ramped up. It suddenly occurred to me that my fiancée, Emily, was nowhere in sight as we hailed our big moment. I quickly locked eyes with our band manager, James, who just shook his head and then dropped his eyes to the ground. My stomach suddenly felt as if the heavyweight boxing champ of the world had used it for a punching bag. Emily finally showed up, walking a bit gingerly, I thought, a few minutes later as we were packing up our gear. Her makeup looked absolutely perfect, as if it had just been reapplied, but her hair looked slightly mussed, something almost unheard of in Emily's world. I got the feeling that she was somehow in a rush to get out and join our celebration. She was flushed and breathing heavy when she leaned in to give me a quick kiss on the lips. I know I smelled pot and aftershave on her before she stepped back quickly. She never said one word about our great performance, probably because she never saw it, I quickly surmised. We got our gear packed and then stood quietly backstage listening to Ravaged Crew do its thing. I had to admit they were a great band, and I hoped we could someday be in their league and make their kind of money. I caught their drummer, David Brown, peeking over at Emily several times, and I know he winked at her once or twice. At one point he caught me watching him and gave me a shit-eating smirk. He didn't even try to hide it. I guess when you're David Brown, you can get away with anything, or at least think so. By this point in their career, Ravaged Crew was approaching legendary status as a band. As an individual, David Brown was already a legend for his ability as a drummer. David Brown has been known to have made love to several A-list actresses before and could practically pick up a woman just by snapping his fingers. I wondered if he even had to snap to get Emily. I eased my way over to James. He ignored me for about 30 seconds, staring straight ahead, before finally turning to me. "She left their tour bus just after you guys finished," he whispered to me. David Brown came out a few minutes earlier, dressed for the show, with that big, stupid grin on his ugly mug. She probably had to do a little straightening up. Damn. I know, not very profound, but it was the best I could come up with at the moment. Our crew left a little before intermission and wound up at our favorite place to celebrate, the State Street Bar and Grill. The crowd was light because a lot of the usual suspects were at the concert. We were treated like conquering heroes as we walked in. Seems like everybody in the bar knew somebody who was at the concert, and those at the show were texting and snapping photos from our set. Although I was raging inside, I tried to play it cool as I needed time to figure out my next move. I didn't have to avoid Emily, because apparently she felt guilty enough that she stayed well away from me, trying not to make it look too obvious. I found myself a quiet spot at the far end of the bar, sipping on my shot of Angel Envy Rye. It's expensive shit, but on a night where we killed it on stage, the smooth amber liquor was well worth the money. As I looked up at the big clock on the wall, I wondered how it all could have fallen apart so fast. Less than 3 hours total time. We did our sound check and still had about an hour before our stage time when crew bass player Vince Knoll invited the band and wives and girlfriends onto the crew tour bus for a little pre-party of tequila and weed. I know the crew members liked the looks of our women. Who wouldn't? They were all beautiful. For example, my Emily is a 5'5" Greek goddess with long dark brown hair, an olive complexion, and a great body. She was dressed to impress tonight in a tight cornflower blue mid-thigh length dress and matching heels. Our band members left the tour bus 10 minutes before we had to perform. Our women stayed behind at the invitation of the crew guys. William, our lead guitarist, and I weren't completely comfortable with the idea, but all four of our women told us everything would be all right and they would just stick around for one more joint. "Are you guys sure?" William asked. All four nodded affirmative. We left to get ready. "Damn," I muttered to no one in particular as I stormed out of the bar, got into my car, and drove home without my fiancée. It only took 5 minutes after I got home before our house phone rang. Guess who? "Hey, baby, where are you?" "I turned around and you were gone," Emily said. "And you're surprised how?" I asked. "You were with David Brown tonight. Your history." I slammed the phone hard into the cradle. That should have been a hint. She walked. No, make that ran in the door 30 minutes later, her makeup smeared from crying. "We need to talk, baby," she wailed, tears dropping from her eyes. She flopped down on our sofa and put her head in her hands. "He's David Brown, baby. He's a legend," she said. "And that matters to me, how?" I responded. "He's David Brown. The David Brown," she reiterated, looking at me as if I should be proud to share my woman with him. I couldn't turn him down. "Of course not," I said with my most sarcastic tone. "I mean he's slept with actresses and supermodels." "And that means my former fiancée should just give herself to him," I interrupted. She looked perturbed until her brain caught up with her hearing. Her expression then changed to anger. "Former fiancé. Get real, Daniel," she shrilled. "Everything's already set up and paid for. We're going to be married 3 months from tomorrow." "We're going to be married 3 months from tomorrow, babe. I'm not marrying David Brown's most recent conquest," I replied. "My father is going to kill you," she rasped. "We've got 500 guests coming to the wedding. My parents have spent a small fortune on this." Did I mention that Emily is the daughter of Matthew and Sarah Wilson of the Boston Wilsons, one of that city's most affluent and influential families? I certainly don't know how I could have skipped that detail, because her parents like to remind me about it every other day. They've known me for about 18 months, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say they've reminded me of their wealth and social standing in Boston society at least 36 times. I was hardly their preferred choice for a son-in-law. My day job as a chemical engineer at a small firm in Lansing paid me 6 figures a year, and my growing reputation as a musician was bringing in good money as well, with the promise of more. But I would never be an equal to the Wilsons of Boston. I was tolerated, at best, which is probably the way it should be, I suppose. The biggest name from Punxsutawney, PA, belongs to a groundhog. My family consists of 6 people, all of whom combined have a net worth not worth mentioning. My family has been in the United States for 4 generations. We came over steerage from someplace in Middle Europe. The Wilsons came over soon after the Mayflower landed at Plymouth Rock. They made their money the old-fashioned way: banking, commerce, and sucking up to English nobility until just before the Revolution. Emily and I met at Michigan State early in our junior years. She was a public relations major. We were both at a 50s party. She was with a date, an uptight-looking swipe, who was pretending to be Elvis Presley. He must have had a bit too much to drink because he tried to fight me after staggering into me and knocking my beer out of my hand. He opened a big mouth to me and I closed it for him, smashing him once in the middle of his stomach and knocking the wind out of him. He crawled around on all 4s before throwing up. She left the party with me. We dated for 3 months, after which we made love for the first time and became exclusive. I asked her to marry me at the 1-year mark. It hasn't always been easy. The woman knows she's beautiful, and since she comes from money, she has that entitled air about her. She and some of my more crude friends don't see eye to eye. She can't see why I don't just drop them if I love her. "That's not who I am," she always insisted. "Exactly," I would reply back. I suddenly came back to the present when I heard Emily pleading, "Please, Daniel, I love you, only you. We can get things back on track." "You love me, really?" I said. "How could you do this to me if you love me?" "This had nothing to do with love, Daniel. It was a chance to do David Brown." I spat. "I get it, Emily, even though I don't get it." She blushed crimson and looked like she wanted to respond, but while her lips moved, no sound came out. Tears continued to leak down her cheeks. That was absolutely cold, Emily. I'm sorry, Daniel. Really. It was a mistake. Surely we can get past one mistake. I put my hands up to the sides of my head. I suddenly had a massive tension headache. It was a deal-breaking mistake, babe, and we're not even married yet. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life wondering if my wife is screwing every famous guy she meets. And by the way, you really need to take a shower. I didn't get much sleep on the sofa that night. I knew my decision was the right one. I was devastated by the event that led up to that decision. I loved the stupid girl. I was on my 5th cup of coffee when Emily finally staggered out of the bedroom. I could see she had a fitful night of sleep because she looked like absolute shit. I wondered which bothered her more, me breaking the engagement or having to tell her parents. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down on the other end of the sofa. "Can we talk some more?" she asked quietly. "I'm not sure there's anything more to say," I responded in a measured voice. It took every ounce of self-control not to get up and slap the shit out of this woman. "I'm sorry, Daniel, really, really sorry, both for cheating on you and hurting you. I was selfish and stupid. It was a silly mistake." So much for self-control. A silly mistake, I raged. No, this was the mother of all serious mistakes. Saying you're sorry, crying a bit, and looking remorseful won't quite cut it. "So, if we're finished here, your parents want you to call them." "Oh no, you've already spoken with them," she croaked. "I figured they needed to hear the truth, and I didn't trust you to do that. It was very hard for them to hear." Your mother sounded embarrassed, probably wondering how she was going to explain this to her friends at tea. Your father, on the other hand, I thought he was going to have a heart attack. No father ever wants to hear such things about his daughter. Tears turned into full-blown sobbing and wailing. "Oh no, oh no, oh no. I can't believe you threw me under the bus like that," she squeaked. "You didn't think I was going to fall on my sword for you because you wanted to sample David Brown's sword. Get real. Especially when your father starts putting dollar signs to everything he's already spent on this wedding. At least he had the decency to apologize to me for your indiscretion, as he put it. That was right before he told me he never wanted to see me ever again, and if he did, he might have one of his security guys break one of my legs. It's a good thing I'm the innocent party in this. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going over to Boomer's apartment so the guys and I can discuss our next few gigs, and maybe one of them will know of some place I can crash." I found a new place to live 2 weeks later, and Emily was out of my life. My heart hurt, but I was young and would eventually bounce back, even though the guys in the band teased me for the next year by hiding 12-inch rulers in my car and band gear. What can I say? My friends play rough. The end? Well, not quite. The phone was ringing as I got back to my apartment after a 5-mile run on a Saturday morning, about 8 weeks after my split with Emily. It rang at least 6 times before I finally picked up the receiver and got a surprise. "Hello," I huffed, still slightly out of breath from my jog. "Daniel, is that you?" "You sound like you're about to have a heart attack or something," Emily answered. I consciously tried to slow my breathing as I realized my ex-fiancée was on the other end of the line. I hadn't talked to her since I moved out after breaking our engagement due to her cheating on me. I have to admit I wasn't pleased to hear her voice. "What does she want from me?" cascaded around my brain. "I just finished my Saturday morning run," I snapped. "What do you want?" There was silence on the other end of the line. I knew my churlish answer probably threw her off. Daniel, I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to tell you that I'm pregnant." The silence on the phone line was mine this time. I was looking at the receiver as if I expected to be able to see the words coming through the phone. I'm sure my mouth was hanging open. I'm not sure how my legs were still holding me up. "Why are you calling me, Emily? We're not together anymore." I responded blankly, totally not seeing the big picture. This kind of thing didn't happen overnight, Daniel. I'm about 2 months along. My gynecologist confirmed yesterday what the home test said, Emily announced. Admittedly, I went stupid for a few moments. Right after she said the word pregnant, nothing in my life made sense anymore. I had one of those long, stretchy phone cords on the kitchen phone. I staggered over to my small kitchenette and melted onto one of the stools. I intend to have this baby, she stated. My parents and I expect you to do the right thing by our child. Regardless of what your parents think of me, of course, I will do right by our child, I said before the proverbial light bulb went on above my head. But you're assuming that it is my child. That seems doubtful to me, Emily. If memory serves me correctly, and it does, 2 months ago you were getting your world rocked by the legendary David Brown, and I happen to know that you didn't have your diaphragm in that night. I checked in your nightstand drawer when I got home that night, just because I was pissed and curious. But you and I also made love several nights before then, and I didn't have my diaphragm in then either, she snarked. Maybe, maybe not, I responded. An amniocentesis could tell us in a couple of months. Doctors still aren't sure those tests are that safe, she said. Well, then I guess we'll just have to wait until the baby is born to find out, I said. Until then. Look, Daniel, we could get back together, and I'll spend the rest of our lives making things up to you. I'm sorry, Daniel. I love you. You didn't love me enough when it counted to keep your legs closed. I suppose there was a chance we could have made love when Emily didn't have her diaphragm in and the kid could be mine. I seriously doubted that, but I was ready to do the right thing if that was the case. There was no way, however, that I was going to raise another man's child, particularly one from David Brown. A week later, I received another unexpected phone call. Very unexpected, actually. Matthew Wilson requested we meet at his office. Who am I kidding? He summoned me to his office after work the next day. I wasn't thrilled about being commanded to appear before the king in his court, but my curiosity won over my annoyance. Yes, the thought that he might be setting me up for a trap crossed my mind. I was very guarded when one of Matthew's security personnel escorted me into his office. I was directed to a seat across from Matthew at his enormous desk. In front of me was a glass filled with some kind of liquor in a stunning leaded crystal glass. That's Pappy Van Winkle 23-year-old bourbon there, young man. The epitome of sipping whiskey. In my very not-so-humble opinion, you will never taste anything so smooth in your life, Matthew said. It's my way of showing you one of the finer things in life that could be yours, after we finalize our business negotiation. As he laid it out, Matthew Wilson loved his only daughter, so much that he was willing to give me a cushy job with $1 million salary and plenty of benefits, including a mansion near Boston, so his daughter and her husband could raise his grandchild. To put it plainly, he didn't want anyone to know his daughter got impregnated by David Brown. Even though I was a nobody, he preferred me to claim his grandchild as my own before the world found out that his daughter got knocked up by the legendary rocker and bad boy, David Brown. I listened intently to what Matthew Wilson was telling me, translating in my head as he spoke. To my everlasting shame, I actually considered it. Hey, I'm human. Who wouldn't want to be an instant millionaire? And I get to keep my wife? Wait. What? Why would I want to do that? Sure, she was hot, but I could find other hot chicks. Other hot chicks who wouldn't cheat on me. Other hot chicks who weren't already pregnant with David Brown's child. Okay, maybe I couldn't necessarily find other hot chicks whose parents were Wilsons from Boston, but at least I'd be able to shade without being ashamed of the guy staring back at me in the mirror. I politely told Matthew Wilson that I wasn't for sale. He said he understood. Said there weren't many 20-somethings who would turn down the money he was offering. 2 months later, Matthew Wilson was a lot less cordial as he leaned over the trunk of a car into which I had been shoved. I should kill your ass. You just had to embarrass us, didn't you? Even if I wasn't disoriented from being smacked around, handcuffed, and stuffed into a car trunk, I didn't have a clue what he was talking about. I said the only intelligent thing that came to my mind. Huh. That earned me a couple more gentle love taps to my face from one of Matthew's security guys. Matthew started to scream at me and hit me with a rolled-up newspaper like one would do to an errant puppy if they wanted to put the pup into a coma. Then he unrolled the paper and showed me the front page. It was the National Enquirer, and right there on the cover was a photo of an obviously pregnant Emily with a headline underneath asking if she was going to be the mother of David Brown's next child. I didn't do that. I croaked as I spit out blood. I swear. Why would I want to out myself as a cuckold to the world? I make good money, and hopefully someday in the future I will find a girl who will be faithful to me. I didn't get hit after that, even though I had closed my eyes in anticipation. I waited several seconds before opening them. I could see Matthew pacing behind the vehicle. "Goddamn, that makes sense," he finally said. "Probably one of those other guys in the band. Maybe one of their girlfriends. I'll get someone on that. You guys take him to a nearby hospital, and make sure they send me the bill." One of the goons ripped me out of the trunk and shoved me into the back seat of the car. Nobody even had the decency to apologize. And before anyone wonders, no, I didn't try to have Matthew arrested. Like that would have actually worked in Boston. Besides, Matthew had troubles far worse than worrying about being arrested for assault. The press had 6 months of fun at Emily's expense, treating her like a Kim Kardashian wannabe. I know that had to just about kill her mom, Sarah, who lived and died on being a Wilson from Boston. I'm sure she made Matthew's life a living hell for those 6 months. It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Emily moved back to Boston soon after the scandal hit the newspapers. She would wind up marrying and divorcing 3 times, and had 4 children from 4 different men, including the one who turned out to be David Brown's. I got over Emily after about a year, but wasn't dating anyone regularly when one of the guys from the band left a People magazine open to a photo of David Brown and his latest conquest on my gear one Friday night before one of our shows. The joke had grown very old, but guys are a different breed. We beat a joke to death before we give it up. Haha, guys, absolutely hysterical. I'm holding my sides so I don't split apart from laughing so hard, I said as I grabbed the magazine, intending to chuck it somewhere. Just then, I actually took a good look at the 4 photos in the story. Not that I really cared that David Brown was sleeping with a big-booed former Playboy playmate. It was actually the 3rd of the 4 photos on the page that caught my eye. A photo of family man David Brown with his new girlfriend and his mother, a big-boot Mayoff if there ever was one. Holy shit. David Brown's mother was a walking wet dream of a 50-something with long blonde hair, big blue eyes, and a body that any 40-something would be proud of, let alone a 50-something. Damn, the guy's mom is even hot, I whispered to no one in particular. I stuffed the magazine in my bag. I'm pretty sure I had the same grin on my face that the Grinch did after he stole all the toys in Woeville. I spent the next month doing some research on David Brown, well, actually his family, who, it turned out, lived in Columbus, Moms Brown, whose real name turned out to be Jessica White, was long ago divorced from Pops Brown, whose name was Paul White. Seems the pair were married for 20 years before they split due to David Brown's dad trying to be the man whore his son was. It was easy to see by looking at the various photos of Jessica White that she knew she was still hot at 52. Her dresses and skirts were a few inches shorter than your basic soccer moms, and she certainly wasn't shy about showing off the wonderful cleavage that God gave her. And then it came to me like a backhand across the face. The guys in the band, as well as my co-workers, were sorry to see me transferred to the Columbus office. I pretended I was sorry too, but in reality, I was feeling pretty good about things. I got a healthy raise to take the promotion, and 2 months later, I had a date set up with Jessica White. Yes, that Jessica White. Ostensibly, my meeting Jessica was complete happenstance. She and her best friend, Amanda Jones, were out for drinks at a local hotspot where she was a known quantity, being the mother of David Brown. I knew from my research that she was going to show up at least one of the weekend nights. She and her friend showed up at about 8, and 30 minutes later, I sent drinks over to their table. They acknowledged me with a nod, but I held my spot at the bar until Jessica finally got up and came over to me. "You are either the cheekiest guy in the world, or your vision might need some tweaking," she said. "We are both old enough to be your mother." "Yeah, but if my mom ever looked like you two, I'd be in a world of trouble," I said as sincerely as I could muster. "Oh, please," she laughed. You are the cheekiest bastard ever. I spent the rest of the evening with the two women and had a great time. I was pretty sure they enjoyed themselves as well. I got Jessica's number and a promise that they would be at the restaurant again the next Friday night. I was pretty sure Jessica dressed for me the next Friday night. Her little black dress was mid-thigh and seemed to float on her hips, and the top was unbuttoned to right in between her large breasts. She wore a lacy black bra, which I, along with everyone else, got to see a lot of during the evening. Amanda was dressed a little less, flamboyantly, shall we say, and she seemed to stay a bit more in the background, like a good wingwoman should. Jessica seemed a little less concerned over the differences in our ages and was leaning in and touching me on my arms and shoulders more. We talked about ourselves here and there, but I noticed that neither she nor Amanda mentioned her famous son. I didn't either, but of course I had an ulterior motive. When the two left at about midnight, I got a nice hug from Amanda and an even better hug and a soft kiss on the lips from Jessica. Mum. I called Jessica for a date for the next week, and she accepted after a couple of seconds of silence. Are you sure, cheeky? What would your mother say if she found out you were taking out someone her age? Jessica asked. She'd probably tell me to make sure I was polite and held doors for you. The same thing she would tell me if you were 18 or 35, or probably the same age as her, Jessica giggled. You can hint, but I'm not telling you my age or my weight. Didn't your mama teach you there are some things you should never ask a woman? Bra size, I answered. Age, weight, and bra size. But if you don't want to wear a bra, then I won't have to worry about not asking you that question. At my age, which I'm still not telling you, I think not wearing a bra is not attractive. The girls are not as perky as they were when I was your age, she said. I think you are underestimating yourself. A little bit of gravity doesn't hurt the look. Most guys enjoy the braless look. Try it and tell me I'm wrong at the end of the night. Cheeky and persistent. I guess this is what I get for hanging around with a kid, she said. I wasn't sure she would actually go braless, but she was a vision of beauty when she answered the door that Friday. She wore an emerald green dress that fit snugly and was held up by two thin spaghetti straps. Hey, she said, my eyes are up here, young man. Yeah, but your lovely breasts are definitely right. There, I said, grinning broadly. Just tell me I don't look ridiculous, she rasped. You look absolutely fabulous. Hot, hot, I whispered. I went all out trying to impress Jessica, starting with dinner at Pasqualone's, the best Italian restaurant in Ohio. Then we hit Swing Columbus, a jazz and blues club with a dance floor. I'm not a great dancer, but I can hold my own, and I know most women like to dance. I also discovered she appreciated fine spirits, savoring Glenmorangie 18-year-old single malt neat. We talked the entire evening, but the subject of her famous son didn't come up, nor did I mention that I was a musician. It was probably the best date I ever had. When the evening ended, I got a soft kiss on the lips and a date for the next Saturday. The following Saturday, our date didn't end until Sunday afternoon. We had dinner, but instead of dancing, she insisted we go back to her house for drinks and dessert. She once again went braless, this time in a scoop neck cranberry dress that showcased her alabaster-colored breasts. I enjoyed admiring her chest openly. She smiled demurely every time she caught me looking, which was quite often. You are wonderful for an old woman's ego, you know that? She asked at one point during the evening. Hey, just doing my part, I replied. We drank about a half bottle of Glenfiddich 18-year-old single malt, and she had baked a New York-style cheesecake. All that, and she baked too. During our conversations, she informed me that her son was the famous drummer David Brown from Ravaged Crew. I pretended to be surprised. I had mentioned that I was a part-time musician and occasionally played in a band. She then came clean and told me about her son. I told her we had met once, briefly, several years ago when I lived in Michigan. I gushed over how much I loved Ravaged Crew, which wasn't a lie until the incident with my fiancé, which I didn't tell her about. We ended up in her bed. She had the stamina of a much younger woman and was probably the most enthusiastic partner I'd ever had. She was a little self-conscious about her body at first, the older woman thing, but she quickly got over that when she saw I wasn't the least bit put off by her body. I personally thought it was a great body for a woman of any age, and I'm pretty sure I drooled once or twice as I slowly removed her clothes. As I said, she was very enthusiastic and also quite loud. She spurred me on to heights I hadn't ever reached before. The woman was a goddess. We began to spend most of our spare time with each other. I think she was as taken with me as I was with her. This definitely wasn't in the plan. I'll admit that when I started my pursuit of David Brown's mother, my motive was revenge. This, however, went way past revenge. Jessica had grabbed hold of my heart. I considered not saying anything, but that could lead to disaster if she ever met my parents. Damn. I needed to come clean if this relationship was going to go somewhere. This wasn't going to be easy. It took me 3 weeks to actually work up the guts to have the discussion. When I did, we were both naked, having just made love. It seemed like the right time. We were lying in bed facing each other, both breathing hard. Jessica gave me a weak smile. I could tell that she had given me her all, as usual. I need to tell you something, I began haltingly, and I don't want you to say anything until I'm completely done. Can you do that? She looked at me intently, and nervously, she nodded, and I started. I told her the whole story of her son and my former fiancé. Then I told her about my plan for revenge as her eyes grew large and tear-filled. You bastard, she started to say, but I put my finger to her lips, and she stopped. I never counted on falling in love with you, Jessica. You ruined everything for me, I said. The tears that she was holding back started leaking from her eyes. You love me, she squeaked. It was my turn to nod. So you're telling me that my newest grandchild, who I haven't even seen yet, is the child of my son and your former fiancé. Are you sure? Yes, I said. Her visage morphed into one of sadness. I'm sorry, Daniel, she said. He gets that shit from his philandering father, who thought every woman should get a piece of him. I tried to teach my son better than that. She grimaced and dropped her eyes. Then she looked up brightly into my eyes. Can we back up a bit? She asked. I shrugged. You said you loved me, didn't you? She asked. I did, I rasped. She scrambled on top of me and gave me a scorching kiss. I wrapped my arms around her and turned us over as one. She made love to me with an intensity I had never felt before. We kissed some more before drifting to sleep. I woke to her green eyes staring at me. She smiled brightly. Of course, you are assuming I love you back, she said. It was my turn to smile. So where do we go from here? She asked. I mean, this is kind of uncharted territory. I'm old enough to be your mother. Isn't this kind of weird? I actually hadn't thought about that. My mom was probably going to have a heart attack when I told her about how old my girlfriend was. Well, I'm thinking kids are out of the question, I joked. She gave me a stern glare. I don't need to be having my own grandkids, she said. Fair enough, I responded, but I do think you need to be my wife. This glare wasn't stern. She looked directly into my eyes, blinked twice, then broke into major sobs. I did the only thing I could think of. I wrapped my arms around her and pulled her tightly to me. We stayed like that for several minutes. I do love you, baby, but we can't get married. Seriously, she said. Why not? I like classic rock, I responded glibly. We were back to the stern glare. The age difference doesn't bother me, Jessica. You might be my mother's age, but you don't act like her. You don't dress like her, and you look way younger than her, I said. You mean your mom doesn't wear short skirts and bounce around bracelets? Wouldn't you like to see that? You always want me to dress like that. She's my mom, Jessica. You're my girlfriend, and you're hot, I remarked. You're sweet, Daniel, and a total hornball. But be serious for a moment. 10 years from now, I'm going to be 62 and not hot, and you're going to be 39. Are you going to want to be seen out in public with an old lady? Who says you're not going to be hot? And it's up to you if you're going to be an old lady or not, I said. Seriously, though, I've already thought about it. I'd be absolutely miserable without you, and I think you'd be the same without me. Yeah, but that doesn't mean we need to get married, Daniel. We can live together. "It's done nowadays, you know," she said. It was my turn to glare at her. "That's not how I operate, Jessica. I want you to be my wife, my life partner, my everything." She looked back at me in disbelief. She shook her head. I nodded mine. She burst into tears again. "You sure this isn't just your sick revenge thing, Daniel?" My mother did have a problem with me wanting to marry a woman who was her age but looked and acted a decade younger. We had a small wedding with just a few friends and family members. Yes, she invited her famous son. He came to the wedding. I could tell he didn't remember me at all when Jessica introduced us. I wasn't going to say anything because I'd moved beyond revenge, but Jessica just couldn't pass it up. "You two share at least two things, David," she said as he looked at me. "You're both musicians, and you both made love to the same woman. Only Daniel was smart enough not to get her pregnant." David looked confused, or it could have been the fact that he was totally sober for one of the few days in his adult life. "Your son by that Boston blue blood girl, Emily. That girl was Daniel's fiancée at the time you knocked her up, while his band was opening for you in Lansing, am I? You're just like your dumbass father, David. I thought I raised you better than that. Cost me a couple $1,000,000 every year in child support, and her parents are rich bastards anyway. They are total chumps," David said. "Indeed they are," I said. "And actually, I can't thank you enough. I got pretty close to marrying into that family." Daniel looked out from his spot on the beach into the surf on the big island of Hawaii, where his wife was carefully waiting. He smiled brightly and returned the wave she gave him. At 72, Jessica was no longer hot, but he thought she was still a fine-looking woman in her one-piece suit. The 2-week trip was to celebrate the couple's 20th anniversary. Daniel smiled again, this time to himself. What started out as a plan to get revenge on David Brown became the best kind of revenge, he thought to himself, a life well lived, with a true soulmate. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.